All right, so for this video, I am going to be doing a sort of a quick breakdown of the Vril lizard or the Vril worm theory. Because I feel like not a lot of people make videos about the Vril worm, about the what is the Vril eye worm, what is the Vril lizard, right? So the basic theory about this is that there is a species of sort of homunculus shaped or homunculus sized lizards that have the ability to inhabit, to sort of parasitically take over human hosts. And the way that the Vril lizards do this is they do this through a proboscis or a proboscis. I have no idea how to pronounce it. I'm gonna say proboscis. Just for this video, it might be the wrong pronunciation, but basically there's this sort of horn tip that these lizards have at the center of their forehead, and this is essentially a detachable spinal column that they can basically use to burrow into a human eye and to sort of take over the human brain. And this is where the Vril worm comes into play, is that detachable spinal column that turns into a worm, and it basically parasitically infects a human host through the eye. And this is where we get into the symbolism like the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra that you see in Egypt, where you have that sort of swirly, sort of worm-shaped thing right next to the eye. And that is what that symbolizes. It symbolizes the soul scalping, which is what some people call it, is like the soul of the person being sort of parasitically taken over by this Vril lizard. And the thing about the Vril worm is that this detachable spinal column contains the consciousness of the Vril lizard. Okay, and so whenever they inhabit a human host, whenever they take over a human host, the soul of the original person is scalped, and the consciousness of the Vril lizard is sort of replaces the human consciousness of the original person. And this Vril lizard essentially has the ability to retain the memories of the person and sort of who they were, so that they can essentially blend in and imitate the behaviors of that person. Okay, and this soul scalping rituals, it's kind of interesting because if you look into things like the Black Eye Club, if you look at like why is it that like all of these famous people, all of these powerful people have this sort of big bruise on their left eye. I don't know what it is about the left eye in particular that is of interest here, but there does seem to be a lot of left eye bruises that a lot of these famous people have, which is basically, and this is basically like the after effects of sort of like the Vril worm sort of parasitically hosting, inside of the human brain. It is essentially there's that immediate after effect of like a giant bruise that these people get in their left eye. And yet again, I have no idea what it is about the left eye in particular that seems to be, that these Vril sort of worms seem to be attracted to. But if you look at celebrities covering one of their eyes, if you look at them holding up like a 666 symbol over one eye, that is also one of the things that represents. Is it represents the sort of soul scalping ritual, and I think they do it with both eyes. I think they cover one eye, and I think that they just cover one eye as a form of symbolism. I think it can happen to the right or the left, but there does seem to be a thing about the left eye that seems to be prominent in a lot of like the Black Eye Club sort of pictures. But that's basically the basic theory about the Vril worm, or like the Vril lizard here. And there are a lot of predictive programming or sort of soft disclosure sort of pieces of media that talk about the Vril worm. And the first thing that I want to say is that there is this scene in the sort of animatrix, sort of short animated films that they did along with the Matrix, about this guy getting a worm extracted from his eye by Trinity in this sort of animated short film. And this sort of worm creature is very similar to the worm creature that burrows inside of Neo's stomach in the first Matrix film. But except for this guy, it happens inside of his eye instead of his navel or his belly button, basically. So that's the first piece of media that it makes me think of. And the second thing is that in the movie Dark City, the sort of ruling class of like Alien, or the ruling class, or like the Archons in the movie Dark City, are essentially people that have been parasitically infected by an alien race, and there is this like worm creature that is sort of inside of their brain, or inside of their brainstem inside of the movie. And Dark City is a must watch. I think that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you should watch Dark City, because there is a lot of stuff that goes into, reincarnation, memory wipes. What they do in this city is that they have the ability to control the time in the city. They have the ability to pause time. They have the ability to rearrange the structure, of the city using machinery, and they also have the ability to, inject false memories into people using syringes. And so like, there is a lot of interesting stuff, in the movie Dark City. But the main thing that sticks out whenever we're talking about the subject of the Vril worm is that it happens to be that the main archons or the main villains of the movie, who are sort of these, black hat men, which is this is also related to like the hat men in sleep paralysis, that they sort of symbolize in the movie. But the main thing is that these are people that have been parasitically taken over by these sort of real worms. And the third piece of sort of a soft disclosure, that I personally see, is that there is this TV show by Guillermo del Toro called The Strain, and one of the main promotional pieces, or one of the main promotional posters that they have for this movie series, is somebody's left eye being burrowed into by a worm, and then that is the strain in the TV show. It's a strain of like worm virus that turns people into vampires. And one of the interesting things about this is that the way that the vampire race sort of works, inside of the series, is that whenever a vampire gets too old, or whenever their body starts to decay and deform, what they do is they transfer their consciousness to a new body by essentially vomiting up a bunch of worms to infect a new youthful, sort of body. And that's exactly the way that the Vril lizard supposedly transfers its consciousness to another person. Is that it does it through the Vril worm. Is that like the worm thing, or that detachable spinal column, contains the consciousness of the original sort of lizard, and it's able to be transferred to a new body. And that's exactly how the vampires essentially survive for thousands of years, inside of this sort of TV series, is that their consciousness is transferred to a new, younger body whenever their old body starts to decay and deform, through these worms. And in the case of like the Vril lizard, it's only one worm that detaches, and if they fail, then they essentially die. So that is another interesting piece of sort of soft disclosure when it comes to the Vril worm, when it comes to the eye worm. And you see that that one eye symbolism. Like, one of the things that it makes me think of is, it makes me think of this clip of Katy Perry having her left eye sort of glitch. So sort of glitch out. It's like the Vril worm is sort of glitching out, and so like that is another reference to like the left eye, or at least I believe it's the left eye. It might be the right eye, but from what I recall about that sort of video clip of her eye glitching out, it's the left eye that is the one that is glitching out. And yet again, I have no idea what it is about the left eye that is sort of of interest to the Vril lizards or the Vril worms. But that seems to be like a main sort of pattern. There's also this picture of Queen Elizabeth, who a lot of people say like, oh, okay, she's a shape shifting lizard. There is this well, it's not a video clip, it's an image of one of her eyes being like this bloodied sort of dark color, and of course it's the left eye that is the one that is this sort of bloody dark color. And so there does seem to be this sort of correlation, between a lot of famous and powerful people having that sort of left eye bruise, being a part of the Black Eye Club, and having that sort of glitch. Sometimes that glitch happens in whichever eye the Vril worm has sort of infected. And another thing about the Vril worm is that it sort of wraps around the optic nerve of like whatever eye it sort of burrows into, and so that also might contribute to some of the glitches that a lot of these powerful people have whenever it comes to the Vril eye worm, and things of that nature. But yeah, I just wanted to make a sort of a quick video about this subject, because I think that it's not something that a lot of people talk about. And of course, whenever you have a subject that not a lot of people talk about, or not a lot of people make videos about it, that's how you know that you're sort of reaching some form of truth. Whenever I feel like the system sort of uses the Streisand effect to its advantage. It uses I think there's two kinds of censorship that happen in this realm. There's the loud censorship, and then there's the quiet censorship. The loud censorship is where you get into like controlled opposition, using the Streisand effect to people's advantage, where where you have the sort of outward oppression, or like outward censorship that people can sort of obviously see, and that's where you create the illusion of controlled opposition, and stuff like that. But I think that there is also like a quiet censorship where, if people don't talk about it a lot, or if it's something that is, it's so deep into the rabbit hole that not a lot of people even know about it, I think that that's a sign that you're sort of getting somewhere. And the Vril worm is something that, not a lot of people make videos about it, not a lot of people talk about it. So I just wanted to touch upon this subject, as sort of like a debrief for people, sort of like a debrief for, people who, don't, or sort of like, what the hell is a Vril lizard? What the hell is, a Vril worm? What are people talking about when they talk about, the Vril worm infecting people's eyes and like the Eye of Horus and things of that nature? Like, what are people talking about? It is basically that species of sort of homunculus lizards that can transfer their consciousness through that worm, or through that sort of proboscis, in their head. They can transfer that to a human host, and this is how they supposedly infiltrate human society, and they get into sort of high positions of power and things of that nature. Yeah, and another thing that I want to mention too is that there does seem to be a lot of like this, like the whole symbolism of like the one eye. So it seems to be also sort of loosely depicted in this anime that I remember watching in middle school called Tokyo Ghoul, right? Like the main character essentially gets like organ transplanted from a ghoul, but like the ghouls in this world are cannibalistic creatures that, they have to eat human flesh, and they have like superhuman abilities and things of this nature, right? But I do think that there is a lot of like, first of all, there's the one eye symbolism where like whenever the main character Kaneki becomes a ghoul, he gets that sort of black eye, which is very similar to, Queen Elizabeth's, that sort of, eye being sort of glitched out, or being that bloodied color, or that black color. So that's the first thing that I'm sort of noticed. And the second thing is that there does seem to be a lot of how do you say, like there does seem to be a lot of like Monarch programming sort of symbolism in the movie, like the sort of appendages that all the ghouls have, for example. Like they have these appendages that can come out of their backs that they can use to sort of hunt human beings and things of that nature. They have super strength, and like their skin is resistant to knives and needles and things of that nature. But Kaneki has these sort of appendages that come out, and it reminds me of like Monarch, like the Monarch butterfly. It is kind of like a Monarch symbolism, and that character does also suffer from multiple personality disorder. That character also suffers from like having a fractured personality from a lot of trauma that he goes through in the series as well. So there is a lot of like Monarch symbolism in that movie, even though it's sort of loosely associated with with like that one eye symbolism and like the Vril worm. I feel like there's a lot of Monarch programming stuff that is in that sort of series, and I remember watching it whenever I was in middle school, and it's not something that a little kid should be watching. For sure, it is something that is very much like, there's a lot of like disturbing content, in that sort of anime series. But if we want to go into the subject of Monarch programming, there's this document that I've been reading through about the subject of Monarch programming. One of the things that is discussed, in that document, is how a lot of Monarch programming and MK Ultra sort of programming is inspired by ancient occult rituals. And I'll put the segment of text up on the screen so you can read it, but there's a lot of rituals in the Egyptian Book of the Dead that talk about rituals designed to program the initiate, designed to sort of traumatize the initiate into becoming into having an alter persona, into becoming a monarch slave. And the reason why I bring this up, the reason why I bring up, ancient occult rituals being involved in Monarch programming and Monarch mind control, is that I had a dream a few nights ago about the symbolism of Christian baptism. And one of the interesting things about this is that in this dream, or first of all, one of the tactics of Monarch programming, one of the tactics that they use in order to traumatize the victim, is that they use near drowning. What they do as a method of creating trauma in the victim is that they almost drown the victim to death as a way of creating the trauma and creating the alter persona. And so in this dream that I had about Christian baptism, one of the interesting things is that the baptism was sort of framed as a Monarch mind control ritual, where whenever the person is put into the water or into the river, they're almost drowned to death. And then whenever they come up out of the water, they're born again with a new alter persona that can be used to control them. And so that's the reason why I bring up the the use of occult rituals, the use of ancient rituals as mind control methods, is that I had a dream about baptism being symbolic of near drowning being used as a Monarch programming method. Okay, but but if we go back to the subject of the Vril lizard, if we go back to the subject of the Vril worm, it really does seem to be that in that anime series Tokyo Ghoul, it does seem to be that there is that one eye symbolism. Whenever the main character becomes that cannibalistic ghoul species, his left eye turns into that black sort of blood color in the series. And if we go into go back to like the soul scalping ritual, like a lot of like the famous people, they have like the 666, or like the the OK symbol that they put over the eye. They cover one eye and they have the bruise on their left eye. If we go back to that, it really does seem to be that if you want to be a part of the club, so to speak, if you want to be a part of the club, if you want to live the good life, that soul scalping thing seems to be a prerequisite. And it really makes me think of like whenever people talk about selling their soul for fame, or selling their soul for having the good life in this life. It might be that soul scalp, that selling your soul, or that soul scalping thing might be a much more literal process of this Vril worm sort of parasite infecting these people, so that they can control the famous and the powerful and the influential people in this realm through that droning process. So that does seem to be like a very literal process, and that might be what people are referring to whenever they talk about selling your soul for fame, instead of it being like a metaphorical thing, instead of it being I do think that it also comes in like a spiritual sense, but I think that soul scalping ritual, or that droning process with the Vril worm, is a much more literal representation of like selling your soul for fame. So I think that is another element, or that is another thing that you could sort of go into with that. And if you go, there's this image that I'll put up on screen of this guy being restrained in a chair on top of this sort of stepped oval structure inside of a room. And of course there are people in robes sort of surrounding this guy, and there's this box in front of this guy who is restrained in this chair. And one of the supposed sort of scenario that is going on inside of this picture is that the guy who is restrained in the chair is about to get droned by a Vril lizard, so sort of that sort of homunculus lizard thing, is inside of that box, ready to sort of pounce on this guy and sort of possess him, or and do that soul scalping ritual. So that is another interesting thing, is that image does pop up a lot whenever people talk about the Vril worm or the Vril lizard. And I just want to say that as I was recording this, like I went out to get food before recording more of this video, and one of the interesting things that I saw, or one of the interesting sort of omens that I saw, that I just want to mention, is that I drove by this red SUV that had this sort of vinyl wrap of Medusa with one of her snake hairs covering one eye. That is an interesting omen that I just witnessed. Whenever I went out to get food, whenever I went out, in my car, I pulled up right next to this, guy. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, driving this red SUV with that sort of Medusa sticker, and like one of her snake hairs was covering the left eye. And so that was an interesting thing. But whenever I pulled into this place to get food, that red SUV was like right in front of me. So that is an interesting omen whenever it comes to like the one eye sort of reptile symbolism, and it really does, sort of remind me of like a lot of serpent symbolism that you see a lot, especially in ancient Egypt. There is like a lot of serpent symbolism, like whenever they wear like the serpent on their head, and like whenever they wear the serpent, they have that cobra or that serpent, symbol on the crown or the headdress that a lot of the pharaohs wear. And it really does make you think that about how much serpent symbolism there is around the world, because there is a lot of there are a lot of people that say like, oh, the serpent represents wisdom, it represents knowledge and stuff like that, or it's like a metaphor for something. But it really does make me think if a lot of the serpent symbolism might be referring to the Vril worm, right? Because that was an omen that I just saw whenever I went out to drive, is that sort of Medusa picture, it did sort of remind me of like a lot of the serpent symbolism as it relates to the Vril worm. And of course, in that vinyl wrap or that vinyl sticker, that I saw, like one of her eyes was covered, and it was just like this picture, this image that was just staring at me as I pulled up next to this, this sort of SUV. So that is an interesting thing that I just witnessed, as I was, going out, today, and as I was in the middle of recording this video, right? But yeah, I just wanted to make just a video sort of going over the basics of the Vril worm or the Vril lizard, sort of theory, because there's not a lot of people that talk about the Vril lizard. There's not a lot of people that talk about the Vril worm and sort of the basics as to what the theory entails and some of the symbolism that you can see in, you know, ancient culture, some of the symbolism that you see, like what does the one eye symbolism mean whenever, you know, celebrities cover one eye? What does the one eye symbolism mean on like the dollar bill? You know, like and also like some of the soft disclosure stuff like the Strain and, you know, Dark City and, you know, things of that nature. Like I just wanted to make a video sort of going over the basics of that sort of theory about like what is the Vril worm, what is the Vril lizard, right? But yeah, that's the video.